You know, they say the truth always comes out eventually. But I never imagined it would happen the way it did. I never imagined my own daughter would be the one to expose everything in a courtroom full of strangers. Let me start from the beginning, because this story changed my entire life. My name is Catherine, and for 23 years, I thought I had the perfect marriage. My husband Daniel was a successful architect. We had a beautiful home in the suburbs, 2 amazing kids, and from the outside, we looked like we had it all figured out. But you know what they say about appearances, right? They can be deceiving. It started about 2 years ago. Small things at first. Daniel would come home later than usual, always with a reasonable excuse. A client meeting ran long. Traffic was terrible. His phone would buzz at odd hours, and he'd step out of the room to take the call. When I asked about it, he'd say it was work stress, that a big project was demanding all his attention. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. Because the alternative, the thought that crept into my mind late at night when he wasn't beside me, was too painful to consider. But denial can only last so long. Our daughter Emma was 21 at the time, home from college for the summer. She was always perceptive, even as a child. She could read people, sense when something was off. I noticed her watching her father with this look, this expression I couldn't quite place. It was somewhere between sadness and anger. One night, she came into my room after Daniel had left for another late meeting. She sat on the edge of my bed, and I could see she was struggling with something. Finally, she said, "Mom, do you ever wonder where Dad really goes?" My heart sank. Having your child voice the fear you've been suppressing is like having cold water thrown in your face. But I played it off. I told her he was working hard, that his career was demanding. She just looked at me with those knowing eyes and said, "Okay, Mom, if you say so." Things escalated quickly after that. Daniel became more distant, more irritable. Our son Marcus, who was 17, started acting out. He'd always been close to his father, and I think he sensed something was wrong too. The tension in our house was suffocating. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday evening in late August. Daniel came home, and instead of the usual tired greeting, he walked straight to the living room and asked me to sit down. My hands were shaking before he even said a word. "Catherine, I want a divorce." 5 words. That's all it took to shatter 23 years. I remember the room spinning, my breath catching in my throat. I asked him why. I needed to hear him say it. And do you know what he told me? He said he wasn't happy anymore, that we'd grown apart, that he needed to find himself. Find himself. At 47 years old, my husband needed to find himself. I later learned that finding himself had a name. Jessica. She was 32, worked at his firm, and apparently had been helping him discover who he really was for the past year and a half. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Daniel hired an aggressive attorney, someone with a reputation for going for the throat. I couldn't understand it. After more than 2 decades together, after building a life and raising children, he was treating me like an adversary, like someone he needed to defeat. His lawyer painted me as an unemployed housewife who contributed nothing to the marriage. Never mind that I'd given up my career as a teacher to raise our children. Never mind that I'd managed our household, supported his career moves, hosted countless dinners for his clients and colleagues. None of that mattered in their narrative. They wanted to minimize my share of everything. The house, the savings, even his retirement accounts that I'd helped build by sacrificing my own career. His lawyer argued that since Daniel was the primary earner, he deserved the lion's share of our assets. Meanwhile, Daniel moved in with Jessica. He didn't even try to hide it. Marcus was devastated. He barely spoke to his father for months. Emma, on the other hand, became very quiet, very watchful. I'd catch her on her laptop late at night, and when I asked what she was doing, she'd quickly close the screen and say she was just studying. The months dragged on. Depositions, mediations, court dates that got postponed. My lawyer was good, but Daniel's was better, more ruthless. I watched my settlement offer shrink with each negotiation. I was exhausted, emotionally drained. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering how the man I'd loved had become such a stranger. Emma came home for winter break, and I noticed she'd been acting strange, secretive. She'd receive packages and take them straight to her room. She made a lot of phone calls behind closed doors. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd hug me tight and say, "Everything's going to be fine, Mom. I promise." I didn't know what she meant. I was too lost in my own grief to really press her about it. I was preparing for trial, trying to gather evidence of the life we'd built together, hoping it would matter to a judge even if it didn't matter to Daniel anymore. Then came the final hearing. It was scheduled for late February, almost 6 months after Daniel had asked for the divorce. I walked into that courtroom feeling defeated. I'd seen the writing on the wall during our last mediation session. Daniel was going to walk away with most of everything, and I'd be left starting over at 45 with a fraction of what we'd built together. The courtroom was cold, sterile. Daniel sat at the opposite table with Jessica beside him. She had the audacity to be there, sitting in that courtroom like she had every right. His lawyer looked confident, smug even. My lawyer gave me a sympathetic look that told me she'd done all she could. Emma and Marcus were there, sitting in the gallery behind me. I'd told them they didn't have to come, that this would just be a formality, but Emma insisted. She said she needed to be there. Marcus came to support me, his face set in that angry expression he'd worn for months whenever his father was around. The judge called the court to order. Daniel's lawyer stood up and began presenting their final arguments. They went over everything again. How Daniel had been the sole provider, how his income had funded our lifestyle, how I'd contributed minimally to our financial situation. Every word felt like a knife. I sat there, trying to hold myself together, trying not to fall apart in front of everyone. My lawyer countered, talking about non-financial contributions, about partnership and sacrifice. But I could see it wasn't landing. The judge looked bored, ready to rule in Daniel's favor and move on to the next case. Then something unexpected happened. Emma stood up. The judge looked surprised. "Young lady, this isn't the time for..." But Emma interrupted. "Your Honor, I have evidence that's relevant to this case. Evidence that proves my father has been lying under oath." The courtroom went silent. Daniel's face went pale. His lawyer looked confused. My lawyer sat up straighter. The judge frowned but gestured for Emma to approach. "What kind of evidence?" the judge asked. Emma pulled out a tablet from her bag. "Video evidence, Your Honor. Multiple videos, actually. And financial records." Daniel's lawyer objected immediately. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We weren't notified of any new evidence. This is..." "Your Honor," Emma cut in, her voice steady and strong. "This evidence directly contradicts testimony given by my father. It shows premeditation, hidden assets, and fraud. I respectfully request the court review it." I was stunned. I looked at Emma, my daughter, standing there with such confidence, such determination. I had no idea what she was talking about. What videos? What financial records? The judge considered for a moment, then nodded. "Approach the bench." Both lawyers, Emma and Daniel, moved forward. There was a hushed conversation I couldn't quite hear. Daniel kept shaking his head, his lawyer looking increasingly agitated. Finally, the judge made a decision. "I'll allow it, but Ms. Emma, this evidence will need to be properly authenticated." "It is, Your Honor. I have timestamps, metadata, and can verify the chain of custody." My mind was reeling. When had Emma learned legal terminology? What had she been doing all these months? The judge ordered the video to be played on the courtroom's display system. The bailiff set it up. And suddenly, the screen flickered to life. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was Daniel, in our home. But this was footage from over 2 years ago, based on the date stamp. He was in his study, talking on the phone. Emma must have somehow recorded this without him knowing. "Yeah, I'm going to file for divorce soon," Daniel's voice came through the speakers. "But I need to move assets first. I've already started transferring money to the offshore account we set up. Catherine has no idea. She doesn't even look at the financial statements." He laughed, actually laughed. "By the time we go to court, most of the liquid assets will be protected. She'll get the house, sure, but that's mortgaged to hell anyway. I'll claim business losses for the next 2 quarters, make it look like the firm's struggling." I felt sick. The courtroom was dead silent. Everyone was staring at the screen, at my husband casually discussing how to defraud me. But the video wasn't done. It cut to another scene. Daniel and Jessica, at what looked like a restaurant. This had to be at least 18 months ago, maybe more. Once the divorce is final, Daniel was saying, "We'll be set. I've got almost $400,000 tucked away that she doesn't know about, plus the properties I put in my brother's name. We can get that villa in Costa Rica you wanted." Jessica giggled. "What about the kids?" Daniel shrugged. "Marcus will come around. Emma's almost done with college anyway. They'll be fine." They discussed my children like they were minor inconveniences. like their lives and feelings didn't matter at all. The video continued. Scene after scene of Daniel discussing his plan. Him meeting with financial advisors about hiding assets. Him talking to his lawyer about strategy long before he'd even asked me for a divorce. Him bad-mouthing me to friends and colleagues, setting up a narrative that I was lazy and contributed nothing. There were videos of him with Jessica, dated back over 2 years, proving the affair had been going on much longer than he'd admitted. There were recordings of him coaching Jessica on what to say if she was ever questioned, how to deny everything. The courtroom was in shock. Daniel's lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. Jessica had tears running down her face, and Daniel, my husband of 23 years, just sat there with his head in his hands. But Emma wasn't finished. She presented financial documents next. Bank statements showing transfers to offshore accounts, property deeds that had been secretly transferred, business records that had been falsified to make Daniel's firm appear less profitable than it actually was. Your Honor, Emma said, her voice never wavering, my father has committed fraud, perjury, and has hidden marital assets. These documents prove that he's been systematically stealing from my mother for over 2 years, all while planning this divorce. She turned to look at her father. You taught me to always do the right thing, Dad. You taught me that honesty and integrity matter, so that's what I'm doing. The right thing. The judge looked furious. I'd never seen a judge look so angry. Mr. Whitmore, do you have an explanation for this? Daniel's lawyer tried to speak, but the judge cut him off. I asked Mr. Whitmore. Daniel finally looked up. He glanced at me, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been shame. But then his expression hardened. I want to invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, he said quietly. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged the gavel, calling for order. Daniel's lawyer requested a recess, which the judge granted, but not before saying he was referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. During the recess, I finally got to talk to Emma. I pulled her into a private room, my hands shaking. How? I asked. How did you get all of this? Emma's eyes were fierce. When I came home that summer, I knew something was wrong. I saw how sad you were, how Dad was treating you. So I started paying attention. I set up cameras in the house, hidden ones, in places where Dad spent time. I know it was technically illegal, but Mom, I couldn't let him destroy you. She continued. And the financial stuff? I hacked his computer. Well, not really hacked. I figured out his passwords. He used my birthday for everything. I found all these files, these secret accounts. I spent months documenting everything, making copies, verifying it all. I even consulted with a forensic accountant online anonymously to make sure I had what I needed. I was crying now. My daughter, my baby girl, had done all of this to protect me. Emma, you could get in trouble. The recordings, the computer. I don't care, she said fiercely. He was stealing from you. From us. That money, those assets, they're part of our family too. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. And honestly, Mom, I think given the circumstances, the fact that I uncovered fraud, the court will overlook how I got the evidence. She was right. When we reconvened, Daniel's lawyer tried to have the evidence suppressed, arguing it was obtained illegally. But my lawyer, finally energized, argued that the evidence showed ongoing fraud and criminal activity, and that suppressing it would allow Daniel to profit from his crimes. The judge agreed. While the method of obtaining this evidence is problematic, the content reveals serious criminal conduct. Mr. Whitmore has been perpetrating fraud on this court and on his spouse. I'm not going to allow that to continue. What followed was swift and brutal for Daniel. The judge ordered an immediate freeze on all accounts. He demanded a full accounting of every asset, with forensic accountants appointed by the court to dig through everything. He made it clear that Daniel would be held in contempt if he didn't cooperate fully. The divorce settlement changed dramatically. Instead of getting 30% of what I thought we had, I ended up with 65% of what we actually had, which was much more than I'd realized. The hidden assets Emma had uncovered totaled over $600,000, plus 2 properties Daniel had secretly purchased. But more than the money, I got vindication. The judge made findings of fact that Daniel had committed fraud, that he'd lied under oath, that he'd attempted to hide marital assets. These findings went into the public record. Daniel's reputation was destroyed. His firm learned about the fraud and forced him to resign. Several clients sued him for malpractice, questioning if he'd been dishonest with them too. Jessica left him within 2 months. Once she realized there was no villa in Costa Rica, no easy life waiting for them, and the district attorney did press charges. Daniel was charged with fraud and perjury. He ended up taking a plea deal that included probation, a large fine, and community service. He avoided jail time, but barely. As for Emma, she became a hero to me. But more than that, she showed a strength and a sense of justice that made me realize I'd raised an incredible human being. She's in law school now, planning to specialize in family law. She says she wants to help people like me, people who are being taken advantage of by spouses who think they can get away with anything. Marcus and Daniel have a relationship now, but it's strained. Marcus respects his father less, sees him differently. He tells me he's glad Emma did what she did, that seeing his father's true character was painful but necessary. As for me, I'm rebuilding my life. I bought a smaller house, something that's truly mine. I went back to teaching, and I love it. I've reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with over the years. I've even started dating, though I'm taking it very slowly. People ask me if I ever saw it coming, if there were signs I missed. The truth is, yes, there were signs. But when you love someone, when you've built a life with them, you want to believe the best. You want to trust. And there's nothing wrong with that. What was wrong was what Daniel did. He betrayed that trust in the most calculated way possible. He didn't just fall out of love or make a mistake. He planned to financially devastate me while pretending to still be committed to our marriage. But here's the thing, and this is important. He didn't win. He thought he was so smart, so clever. He thought he'd get away with it. But he underestimated the people around him. He underestimated his daughter's love for her mother and her sense of right and wrong. That day in court, when Emma stood up with that video, it wasn't just evidence she was presenting. It was a message. A message that said you can't treat people this way. You can't lie and cheat and steal and expect no consequences. You can't betray the people who love you and walk away unscathed. Justice isn't always served. I know that. There are plenty of stories like mine where the bad guy wins, where the spouse who's been wronged ends up with nothing. I was lucky. Lucky to have a daughter who refused to let that happen. Lucky to have a judge who was willing to look at the evidence despite how it was obtained. Lucky that the truth came out. But I also want anyone watching this who's going through something similar to know this. Document everything. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore the signs because you want to believe everything's okay. And to anyone who thinks they can pull off what Daniel tried to do, who thinks they're smart enough to hide assets and defraud their spouse, remember this: people will surprise you. The ones you underestimate might be the ones who bring your whole scheme crashing down. That final divorce hearing was supposed to be the end of my old life and the disappointing start of a new one. Instead, it became the moment where everything changed for the better, where the truth came out and justice was actually served. I'll never forget the look on Daniel's face when that video started playing. The shock, the fear, the realization that he'd been caught. And I'll never forget the pride I felt watching Emma stand there, strong and confident, fighting for what was right. My marriage ended that day in the worst way possible. But I also gained something. The knowledge that I raised kids who have integrity, who stand up for justice, who refuse to let bad behavior go unpunished. And honestly, that's worth more than any settlement could ever be. So yes, at the final divorce hearing, my daughter stood up with a video. What it exposed shocked the entire courtroom. But more than that, it exposed the truth. And sometimes, that's all you need. The truth, a brave daughter, and a judge who was willing to listen. That's my story. That's how my marriage ended and my new life began. And you know what? Despite everything, despite the pain and the betrayal, I'm grateful it happened the way it did. Because now I know who I really was married to all those years. And I know I'm stronger than I ever thought I was. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there who might be going through something similar. You're not alone. The truth has a way of coming out. And justice, sometimes, actually is served.